Well, we have a problem. I've been rejected. Story of my life. But anyway, the took the Lincoln Mark VII in to get a state inspection, and he failed me on 3 things. I needed new wiper blades, which was easy to do, and he said that the steering column was loose, which it actually was. So I've got that all tightened up. I just had to tighten 2 screws, one there and one on the bottom, within the steering column to get that all done. And he also said that the horn was not loud enough, whatever that means. Not sure how he determined that, but that wasn't too hard to fix. The only problem is that the horns, for some reason, are way up in there inside the fender. And I'm not the kind of person that blows the horn all the time at people and everything. So the horns just, the contacts inside just got corroded. So what I ended up doing was just banging on that with a hammer for a while, and then exercising the horn directly from the battery with a jumper wire onto that contact to eliminate any problems with the horn switch on the steering wheel or the horn relay. And the horn finally came back to life. So that's done, and I took it back, and he says, well, the power steering pump is leaking, which I didn't really think it was an inspectable item, but I looked at the Virginia code, and it actually is an inspectable item. It can be damp, but if it's clearly leaking, he can fail it, and that's the very first time I've ever had a problem like that. I've had other cars with leaking power steering, and they passed inspection, but apparently this guy doesn't want to make it pass. And you can see it is pretty significant. I mean, it needs to be filled up every once in a while. It's kind of hard to tell. It's not leaking around the front seal, which is nice. It's leaking really around the interface between the plastic reservoir and the metal pump body right there. So what has to happen is I got to get this pump out of here and install a O-ring kit, or a power steering seal kit, which is about maybe $7 or $8. And on the Ford C2 pumps, which is what this is, it's not too bad. Problem is you've got to take this bracket out first, which is also an integrated bracket with the AC compressor here. And the main problem is you can't get these bolts out for the pump because the pulley's in the way. And that requires a special tool, which I bought over here just for that very purpose. This is a brand new tool set, and the logic is that I could buy a reman pump with all the seals in it and everything like that, but I would still need to have a way to get the pulley on and off. Reman pump would be about $50, and the tool set here is about $50. That's $100. Or I could just buy a $7 seal kit, same tool kit, for less money, and do the job myself. So I'll be using this tool kit. Also does GM vehicles as well too. It does a lot of different vehicles, 3800 V6s, probably the 4.3 as well, and also the Ford, of course. And for the Ford, I'll be using this tool adapter and this tool, as well as this one to put the pulley on with this larger bolt. So the first thing to do is to go ahead and start getting it apart and get the serpentine belt off of here. And the way to do that is we'll just stick a breaker bar on the idler pulley here, and we'll just pull back to release tension. Of course, that's going to take 2 hands, but anyway, you guys get the general idea. And then once the belt is off, I'll start working on getting the AC compressor loose and basically set that aside on top of the engine someplace, and then I'll be able to disconnect the power steering return fitting right there, as well as the pressure fitting that this hose goes to, and work this thing out of here with the bracket intact. And then I'll be able to get it on the bench and get that tool on the front of the pulley and get the pulley off, get these bolts off to separate the pump from the bracket, and then kind of go from there. So let me get into it a little bit, and then I'll pick back up in the video with the progress. Well, I'm a little bit deeper into it now. I got the AC compressor relocated on top of the distributor, just basically up and out of the way. Didn't have to break any of the refrigeration lines. And sorry about the lighting, it's kind of dark and cloudy out here, and cold, 45 degrees. Anyway, now you can see the what we're looking at, and this is the actual bracket the power steering pump resides on, and it's a pretty big bracket. So I've still got to remove several more bolts, and then down here I went ahead and pulled off the power steering return line and drained the fluid into a container down there. And the next thing I got to do is unloosen the high pressure return fitting. And if you guys are doing that, even if you're just changing your high pressure power steering hose, you always want to use one of these flare nut wrenches. On this car it's a 5/8, and as you can see it's got an opening here that'll fit over the tubing and grip the bolt or nut on 5 sides instead of just using a standard open end wrench which will grip it on 2 sides. You can use a standard wrench in a pinch, but it'll tend to round off the head of that fastener if you're not too careful. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. That'll be the last thing I got to take off before I can continue working on the bracket. And as I was taking off the power steering return fitting down there, which goes to the reservoir, reservoir of course is nylon, you can already see the problem. That pump is not loose at all. The reservoir is, and it's a common design with all these, common problem actually with all these Ford C2 pumps is the reservoir is not really held on there by anything other than an O-ring around the pump body, and then the high pressure fitting down there. It's basically just a press fit. So over the years that O-ring got hard and started leaking, and I can tell, I mean, this thing being as loose as it is, I would have one hell of a leak. It's amazing that the thing even held fluid at all. So I'm going to go ahead and get this pump out of here and see what's going on. I don't know how far I'll get into it. I don't even know if I want to take the pulley off. I might just get away with replacing the O-ring on the reservoir there and not have to worry about taking the pump out of the bracket and the pulley and all that kind of stuff. So let me get that done and be right back. Okay, now I got the pump completely out of the car, and that's what the high pressure hose looks like, and the bolt around that, or nut around that, is undamaged. And got the pump sitting over here, and this big ugly thing held in with enough fasteners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fasteners. So it definitely had enough bolts, and each one of those bolts was a pain in the butt to get out. But here it is, and as you saw a little while ago, this plastic reservoir was loose against the pump body. The only thing holding it on really is the O-ring and the high pressure, the valve body that the high pressure fitting goes into. So we'll go ahead and unscrew that. And you can see it's got a outer O-ring and then maybe an inner O-ring there. I'm not really sure. That might just be, yeah, that's an O-ring. So 2 O-rings on there, an outer and an inner. I'll go ahead and replace that. This one's just seen better days. It's conical in shape now instead of round. So I'll replace these O-rings and clean all the debris out of here. And that just fits into the high pressure side against this valve. And now the plastic body is ready to come off. I don't know that I'll get too far into the pump to have to remove the pulley. The front seal on it is not terribly bad. It's a little bit damp, but no fluid drips. I wish the lighting were better out here, and I wish the camera had a wider viewing angle, but anyway, we work this reservoir off of here, which should be fairly easy, and clean everything up and see what we got. Okay, I already removed the old O-ring, which you can see is flat, just basically distorted out of shape, and I installed the new O-ring. And kind of how you do that is you can just take a screwdriver, work it up in there, a small screwdriver used for glasses or something like that. Give it a tug so you can get your fingers on it and just kind of work it out. And I use that same procedure for the O-rings on the outlet fitting. So they're all nice and symmetric like they should be, and nice and supple compared to the old O-ring, which is badly distorted and causing leak concerns. And here's that valve I was talking about, the flow control valve, which fits into the valve body here on the output of the pump. And that came out. And one thing I want to say, you want to be very, very clean when you work on these kinds of pumps, and you don't want any debris getting in there, because most of the time the power steering systems don't contain any filters. This one does have kind of a crude filter screen on the output, just as a last resort to protect the steering rack, but that definitely wouldn't be as good as a regular filter. You can see the size of the openings there would let pretty large chunks in. But this flow control valve is in good shape. It's got very minimal wear on there, as you can see from the polished areas. And these grooves are still nice and sharp. So that's fit for service again. And it'll have to be, because they don't really sell them anymore. And of course there's the spring. So it kind of goes together like this. And then the whole thing fits in the valve body like that. And then once that's in there, the outlet fitting goes in there like that. So it kind of controls the flow of fluid through this little orifice on the outlet fitting, as well as the center orifice. And there's the rebuild kit. It contains a front seal and seal retainer, which go together like this, which I'm not going to replace because it's in good shape. And it contains a couple of different O-rings depending upon what pump model you have for the outlet fitting. And you want to make sure that you don't lose that sticker that's on the back of the pump. This is an HBC GV model pump, which is not indicated anywhere in the instructions. But if you look closely at the two different diagrams, one O-ring kind of fits on this inclined plane area on the fitting, where this one's more of a straight fitting. My fitting looked like that, so I used the 3/4 inch O-ring on there. And then you've got other O-rings that you can use to replace inside the pump if you wanted to tear it completely down. They don't really make rebuild kits that I could see that would replace any of the slingers in here or the rotor or anything like that, so that's not good. But in this particular case, the pump is in very good shape. It's very clean, not a lot of metal debris or hardly any metal debris in here. All the edges are nice and sharp. It's never been rebuilt before. You can still see the original paint on there, so doesn't have a lot of sludge buildup. But what you would do is you would end up taking off this pulley down here and then putting it into a vise, compressing this valve assembly down, putting a tool in that hole and taking out a snap ring that goes around here, and the whole thing comes apart, and you'd be able to get inside and replace all the other O-rings. But there's no performance issues with the pump. It runs nice and quiet, The only issue that I had was this outer O-ring retaining the plastic reservoir. It was causing a pretty bad leak on the car. In fact, you saw the reservoir moving back and forth before we even took it apart. So let me get things cleaned up a little bit more, and reservoir just basically slips onto the pump, and you line up the two holes for the output, and that gets screwed back in, and then we'll go back in with it. Acceptance once again. Feels good to be accepted. So got the job all finished up and everything. Sorry I couldn't spend more time on individual processes to get everything put back together. I was sort of running against the clock because I wanted to go ahead and get it inspected today, and the place closes at 5. But here's the finished job. Got the pump all put back in, and you can see down there the high pressure fitting all nice and clean and not leaking. You can even see the O-ring sitting behind it, and then there's the return line, and of course the nice clean reservoir housing. So nothing is leaking around the interface between the pump and the reservoir anymore. And basically installation is just the reverse of removal. You gotta take this air conditioning compressor off and set it aside, and then take off this rather big bracket which has about 7 bolts on it. And I didn't have to take the pulley off, which is really good because it's hard to get it back on there properly and get it aligned with the rest of the belt system. I only ended up using about 3 O-rings, one for the reservoir, 2 pump body, and then 2 for the high pressure fitting. I didn't get too deep into the pump and basically put the whole seal kit in there because it wasn't really needed. The pump wasn't making any noise and it was performing as it should. So it's kind of like a judgment call. Not a whole lot of time to do it. Had to get it inspected today, and pump wasn't having any issues to begin with, so sort of a kind of a quasi halfway repair, but all the major leaks have been addressed, and the car is now finished and once again ready for the road. And I can't say that I'm a big fan of how Ford designed this, where they had this plastic body just sitting on the pump itself just by the O-ring, the friction of the O-ring keeping it on, and then one high pressure fitting. That doesn't seem to be terribly secure to me, but that's not too different from the old ham can style power steering compressors. But at least back on those old cars, the reservoir was metal and the pump was metal, so you had pretty similar coefficients of expansion. And I'm wondering if leaks like this on these C2 pumps are the reason why Ford went to these external reservoirs, like on this Crown Victoria that you see here. Just has a couple of hoses. You got a supply hose and a return hose going to the power steering pump down there. And this is a 1995 Crown Victoria that I will be making future videos of. And does anybody just want to take a guess how many miles are on this thing? Just any wild guesses at all? I assure you they're quite low, which is the main reason why I got the car. It's got the venerable 4.6 liter. So just a little bit of a preview of stuff to come. Not that I need any more cars, but really couldn't turn this one down. So stay tuned.